everyone. Thank you for coming out today to the second legislative issues meeting that the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce sponsors. And then our sponsor is Lane Ranger from AT&T. So thank you, Lane, for being here today. My name is James Lambert. I'm the 2019 chair-elect and the 2020 chair for the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. And we're glad that you're here today. And the legislators brought some nice weather with them this morning.
Thank you.
Beautiful out, nice out. So anyway, I'd like to introduce our legislators. First and foremost on the right, Senator Randall Hardy from the 24th District. Formerly my neighbor. When I first moved back to Salina in 2002, he was my neighbor and he had this wonderful black lab. And we had a hole in our privacy fence and I fed his black lab every time I was grilling in my backyard, which was often. We thank you, Senator, for being here. Representative Steve Johnson, Representative Diana Dirks, and Representative J.R. Clays. So the format of the meetings will be open remarks from the legislators, questions from the audience. There's tablets if you want to write your question down. You can give those to Eric, and Eric will get them over to me. And then closing remarks from the legislators, and then we'll be pretty much finished up. So,
And I'm David Norland, and I told James and Eric that I would ask this question publicly. But I would like to request that the chamber modify today their procedure so that questions from the audience can be taken as they were before. It stifles the amount of interaction between the public and the legislators. And they can set a time limit, let's say 2 minutes for a question. I know that's been an issue before. But I'd like to publicly request that the chamber do that for this meeting. They said they'd take it into consideration for next. They have only one more, and that will be a final session. And I think there will be much more opportunity for public interaction if the chamber would do that today.
I would second that.
it's not up for motion and debate today, but we will talk about it.
James, you can take a vote today about how the chamber would like to do that.
I understand. We'll take it under 5 minutes. Who wants to go first?
Pledge allegiance.
Oh, pledge of allegiance. My bad, sorry. Everyone like to stand. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hi everyone, Randall Hardy, Salina resident, but I have my district, Senate district includes all of Saline County and the northern half of Dickinson County, which includes all those cities along I-70, Solomon, Chapman, Abilene, Enterprise. And before I make some remarks, we have a special visitor this morning and from Wichita. His name's Rob Fillion. Rob, you want to hold up your hand there in the back?
Yeah, I would like to introduce myself. Thanks, Senator. I'm Rob Fillion. I'm the former Ellsworth County Republican chair. So I do currently reside in Wichita. But no, thank you for pointing that out.
And I was hoping that you're welcome to observe, but I would appreciate it if you would not submit questions because we are interested in questions mainly from the district, and that would include the thoughts that I take back to Topeka with me.
No, and that's very fair. But my question is Senator, who do you work for?
Well, who do you work for, Rob?
I work for
I work for Americans for Prosperity.
That's clear. That needs to be in the
Okay.
record.
However, I would like to say, Senator, who do you work for?
I work for the people of Saline County
No,
and
you don't.
Dickinson County.
You guys are completely wrong. You work for the people of the state of Kansas. So every portion, every vote that you make affects my taxes no matter where I live. And
But you know
so
what?
that is what you need to be in line with.
But we're not playing on a level playing field because I don't have the money to send representatives down to Wichita to do the same thing that you do when you come up here.
So me choosing to move is somehow impacting you? I think you can ask Representative Johnson how impactful I was in the county of Ellsworth.
You're talking about old news. And I would appreciate it if you would not submit
You're
questions.
talking about old news because
Yes, gentlemen,
if he's going to call me out, I think I have the right to go ahead.
please, we have a time frame here. Could you please allow the senators and the representatives to have their opening remarks?
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just going to make a couple opening remarks. We had quite an impactful week in the Senate for the session. It was a good thing. I think we voted on a tax bill. We voted on it for education. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to tackle some other subjects that matter, Medicaid expansion being one of them. And I think that I'm hopeful that we will be able to do some good stuff by the end of session. So I'm going to keep my remarks to that and look forward to your questions.
Stephen Johnson, I'll keep my remarks short as well. Thanks to everybody for taking time to come out this morning. I really appreciate those of you that came from Ellsworth, around the area, etc. So thank you for that. Not a lot since our last forum, so I'll keep it short to get to your questions. A couple of interesting hearings in committee. No major progress on the other issues, but they are starting to bubble up a little more, which was useful. In the Appropriations Committee, we did have a discussion on Medicaid expansion. Not the right place for it, not how it will work, but it was useful to hear the discussion, and I did learn some things from having a chance to talk through that with other people and gain some other perspectives on it. In addition, yesterday I went to the medicinal cannabis, or whatever the right word is, in the Senate hearing, which was also a chance to learn a lot. And what I did learn on both is there's not an easy answer. There actually are some thorny things to consider as you look at moving forward on either of those. But both of them address the types of things that I think are worthy of discussion and worthy of trying to find a way through to see if there's a way from where we are to better. And how we best manage those risks. They're obviously very different. I spent some time with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation after hearing the testimony to get more insight into the challenges that they face, just to be realistic about addressing it. I'm glad to go into those issues or other issues that are at the top of your minds as you wish to direct questions. So thanks for being here and look forward to the discussion.
Representative Diana Dirks, 71st District. Welcome to the forum this morning. It's nice to see that you're out bright and early this morning. I hit every stoplight and every construction zone getting here this morning, but that is progress. So, so glad to be back here. It's always nice to be home and friendly faces. We have had a lot of conferees coming to the meetings, especially in children's and seniors this year. And it's amazing some of the questions that they do come up with. And we listen to every single one of them. Of course, we can't always answer all the questions because sometimes often it's irrelevant for that particular bill. But it does give us an insight as to perhaps a bill that needs to be drafted. So whether or not, we're able to please everyone when they come up there, there's always a means that maybe we can find something that will. I was real disappointed that the Medicaid expansion portion of the recent bill was taken out. I think it's very important that we get this done and get it passed. I know it was put into that bill, hopefully that it would have at least some traction. You know how I feel about that. Been working again with the kids on the vision screening bill. There is also one on a data survey that they are going to be looking at and hopefully, get some other things going in the education portion of it. I brought with me today a packet. It is survey questions. I feel it's very important that we know what your thoughts are on some of these issues. So they're back on the table. And if you'd like to take one with you or just email it to me, your answers, you don't have to have a whole page full of replies, but it's important to me that I know where you are. I know where the committees are and what my colleagues are thinking about, but really, realistically, we need to pay perfect attention to our constituents, and those of us who are here try to do that, and I think the survey might help me with that.
Good morning. First, I want to thank AT&T for sponsoring and the Chamber for, of course, hosting these issue forums. I'll start off. I just have a few items that are different than the last time we met. Next week, the House Transportation Committee, on which I serve, will take up a new transportation plan. We're currently in the midst of T-Works, and typically those run in 10-year cycles, so we are tackling the next transportation plan coming up. In appropriations, I did a couple of items that I think are of note. The Kansas Highway Patrol has an aircraft program. Currently, they handle the executive aircraft, which is King Air, and then they have 5 other aircraft that they use to monitor roads, deliver organs. They do a lot of things with their aircraft across the state. They house them in Topeka, Wichita, and Hayes. Those aircraft are aging, and so is, actually more importantly, the equipment on those aircraft is aging and becoming obsolete. So I put a placeholder of $2.8 million in the budget for KHP aircraft replacement. They're also going to start switching from having more fixed-wing aircraft, which primarily the fleet consists of now, to helicopters. They're more agile and can fit some of the needs that they have, especially in our rural communities. We don't have an aircraft to do search and rescue and recovery and things like that. The KHP tends to be a backstop for our smaller counties and even in our region here. And then also put in a proviso for information on a Aerospace Commission model. Currently KDOT, spoke about this last time. Currently KDOT has the Division of Aviation inside of it, instead moving to an Aerospace Commission model. I may have mentioned last time that we tend to be the loser when it comes to jobs in aviation. We've lost about 18% of our aviation jobs since 2005. Oklahoma and North Carolina, who consequently have aerospace commissions, have gained anywhere from 94 to 110% in that same period of time. So we aren't losing those jobs necessarily to Mexico or China. We are losing them to states who are in the fight, and I think we need to get back in that fight. Currently, we're not. And I'll just stop there. I think you probably have plenty of questions, and we'll just leave the time for that. So again, thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you all for your opening remarks. First question. Do non-gun owning law-abiding citizens, example, most Americans have a right to expect lawmakers to pass reasonable restrictions on access to guns? If the answer is yes, please explain what you think is a reasonable restriction.
I'm a big proponent of Second Amendment. I think I own guns myself, but I think we need to also remember that at least I think I'm a reasonable person, and not all gun owners might be in that category. I do think that anyone that wants to purchase a gun should go through some sort of process to determine whether or not they should legally be able to own a gun. And I think that would go a long way to, keeping guns in the hands of people that are responsible gun owners.
I don't have any gun legislation in mind that I have brought or intend to bring. I'd be happy to look at any suggestion somebody has either way and opine on that, but I don't have a recommendation for change.
I don't own a gun. I held a rifle one time when I was about in the teens, and that was enough for me. I think the thing that I would like to see, not legislatively, but just that those individuals, I am just hopeful that they make sure that those guns are put away and secure so that little kids can't get into them. I mean, it's certainly the gun owner's responsibility for that. I know that when we were farming, there was an incident just on one of our neighbors' farm that the kids had gotten into Dad's closet, got a gun out, and they were just playing with it. And it did have a bullet in the chamber, and it went off and killed one of the kids. So I think this, to me, is just really important. As far as having guns, I have nothing against that. But just keep an eye on the safety issue. Excuse me.
Okay. I think we had here a couple of years ago an issue where the third floor of the city-county building where we have our courthouse, we have the concealed carry issue where it's either all or nothing in those buildings. So it was either secure the entirety of the city-county building or allow concealed carry in the entirety of the city-county building. And I proposed an amendment to that bill that eventually passed that allows us to secure the third floor while allowing for concealed carry on the other two so that we didn't have to go through that expense of securing every entrance. I think those things are reasonable. Sure, absolutely. Also, on the other end, I did propose legislation in this session that would allow for a concealed carry permit for those who are 18 to 21. Currently, constitutional carry and permit carry in Kansas is from 21 and up. This would allow for permit only from 18 to 21. So those are the only two items I would have that relate to the question.
Thank you. The next question is, what education bill do you think is the best for the Kansas kids and will have the approval of the Kansas Supreme Court? House Bill 2395, completely different than passed last year, or Senate Bill 142 on the same pathway of last year?
Well, the Senate just passed 142, and I think that that bill does satisfy the court, and the formula that brought funding up to date from what they call Gannon 6 from way back in the 2000s. And I think that that bill, if successful, would hopefully end the chain of litigation that the legislature's been dealing with over the last decade or so. So I like Senate Bill 142. It provides for 2 years of funding at about 90. This is for the inflation factor for around $90 million a year, and with the expectation that we would continue that until the bill is paid to bring us into compliance.
There's a lot in all of those bills, and I actually think we sometimes make this discussion even bigger than it is, not to say that it is not important. But the details in the bill, as we try and get to where we need, and I think the question is framed right, how do we best meet the needs of the kids and focus on that, rather than maybe the desires of any of my groups that are around that. And all those stakeholders are important. As we look at education, total expenditures, all funds in the 2006-2007 year, $5,142,000,000. Since that time, it has increased most years. It did not increase into 2010-2011. So the 2010 year did not have an increase in all funds. It was a $2 million decrease. That is the only year that there is a decrease in funding, total funds. And these are total funds. It's all money in. So it's federal, state, local, just all dollars. And some of it is capers that confuses the issue as you go through it. And I just got the numbers. I asked research to go through it so I could just get a handle on what had happened. And this is through 2016 is the last year that the data is current. And in 2016, it was $6,025,000,000. So an increase of not quite $1 billion over that time frame. So slightly less than a 20% increase over 10 years, not up with inflation. Number of things that are there, even all things considered. Since 2016, we have committed, again, all funds, everywhere in, just over $1 billion. Still 4 more years till all of that is realized. Most of that increase is not already in. At this point, the contention in the bill is on, does the additional $90 million come in for this year? I can indicate what future years are, but I can't bind the next legislature, so I can say, I think we're going to pay $360 million or whatever the number is in 3 years, and I think it'll happen, but I can't know. I can't know what we pay out next year with some degree of certainty. And that's usually some 90 million, however we're framing that is here. And while 90 million is absolutely an issue, and while the issue absolutely needs to be settled, none of my other areas know their budget within 1.5% when I boil it down to that number. So what I think we all need to continue to strive to do is recognize that the needs are absolutely great. And how do we help folks who don't understand the needs better understand the needs and the opportunity for the investment? And how do we make sure that everyone writing the checks understands that and wants to continue to be engaged? And we work so hard at it in our communities to make everyone understand and provide those opportunities, and it is not easy. But how do we make sure everybody's at the table to have that agreement so we move forward with the same vision and very willingly embracing whatever that decision is together? I think a lot of the nuances on the bill, that we spend more time than needed in the energy to try and get there. Not again to understate the importance of the issue, because I do not mean to do that. But we need to just continue to say, here's what we've got, here's what we need, and here's how we're going to agree to go forward. Once we start introducing the other policy pieces of the bill, I think that makes it harder to come into agreement. While there may be policy pieces that I like or don't like, I want to try and focus on the money, how we work our way through that, and recognize, yes, the courts have a say. We need to follow that. And ultimately, as we had said, as I had mentioned the last time, it's just us. What do we most want to do? And how do we disagree well to have everyone's voice be a part of that and be able to have a decision that everyone truly is able to live with? Maybe not support, but at least be able to live with and say, yes, the number is $7,293,000,000, and that's the number that we're shooting for, and we're able to operate within that. So to that end, I still don't know all the details on both of those. I've not been a part of K-12 budget this year, which I've kind of missed, and I don't know enough of the nuances between the Senate and the House bill that is there. I believe we're actually going to have a chance to start talking about the House bill on Monday of next week to hear a little more about what that team has been working on. So, but I just hope we can all engage in that. And I absolutely saw disagreement with the numbers I have. I haven't seen anyone set of numbers that are complete, and that's why I went to research to say, okay, just give me the total number as best you can, and whatever history is there. And the numbers aren't always perfect, but research is usually pretty good at trying to pull different information together, and we can slice and dice that differently and try and figure it out. And I think that's essentially the process that's been going on. But challenge the frame of my data, of all the data, to just make sure we've got the best information that we can make a decision on, and be able to operate and make sure that the doors are open and that our key needs are met.
Not much left after that. He's a hard person to follow, let me tell you. Actually, with the two bills, there's a contention of some of the elements that are in the House bill. Some of my colleagues have been saying that they're not in favor of it. Other members of the constituency are not in favor of it. There's an element with the voucher system coming in there, and some elements that really are not conducive to what we're trying to do in getting adequate funding for the schools. So I think I have not, at this point, had an opportunity to look at the Senate bill, but I understand it has some elements in it that we would be happy with. So I'm thinking that maybe the Senate bill might prevail. But at this point, not having had an opportunity to take a look at it as of yet, because he just went through it, he would have more knowledge of that. I really feel that the House bill is still not adequately getting to where we need to be, and there's still going to be an issue with it. So I'm hoping that the Senate bill will come up, has some elements in there that we're going to be able to live with and get past and get on down the road, just to make sure that our kids are adequately have the opportunity, have the education that we want them to have.
So the question was, which bill do I prefer, I think is where we were headed with that. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really read either of them yet, so we'll probably hold any declarations on that. But I do appreciate my colleagues' optimism that this will somehow satisfy a court that moves the goalposts quite frequently. But let's talk a little bit about pettiness, because I think that it's easy to get drawn into that trap when the court does move the goalposts like that. And I do handle the budget for the judicial branch of our three-branch system, and they have requested some pay raises. We have non-judicial employees who make less than $20,000 a year. Very, very difficult to make a living off of that, and they're asked to do really tough work. And the difference, I would just point out, there's a 10-year period basically where this fight's been going on, where the judicial branch hasn't seen pay increases at all. So we went in and we did add a judicial branch pay plan that will, over the course of 5 years, expend about $22.5 million in increase. So year one, it's $5 million extra, the next year, $5 million extra, and so on. So it's building on top of each other. You know how this works because you've seen school finance plans. So over that 5-year period, it gets to $22.5 million and brings them up to being a little more competitive with where other states are. I wouldn't say that they're really even in probably the top half, but it would certainly bring them up from the current position of 51 where they find themselves today. And I think it's just, again, I'm just bringing this up because I think it's easy to get caught into the traps of pettiness that have existed in the past, that decade of withholding pay increases for people who really have nothing to do with this fight. It's just, I don't know what else other word to use, but it has been petty. But Appropriations Committee did pass that. So year one, I think we have about $7.5 million in increases total. 5 of that's in wage increases. And then years 4 and 5 are only 1.6 each to get us there. So it is front-end loaded to get the non-judicial employees primarily pay increases faster. So their pay increase actually ends up being hit on year 3. Judges end up being stretched out until year 5. If you really love the numbers, which I do, it's $3.4 million a year for our non-judicial employees to get them up. And then it's 1.6 for the judges per year, 3 years for the non-judicial, 5 years for the judges to get them there. The total, again, is about $22.5 million. But I'll stop there because like I said, I'll withhold judgment on those 2 bills until I've read more about them that's not from the newspaper.
Could you explain what you mean by pettiness? I'm not clear on that.
Well, I think that when you have the judicial branch continuing to do this, it's easy as a legislator to fall into the trap of saying, well, I'm going to do this to you then, if you're going to do this to us. And over that 10-year period, it just seems like that lines up really nicely with when we weren't keeping their pay scale up to what is the norm across the board. So there is a 10-year period where they're just flat funded across the board during this battle. Not that this battle's only been going on for 10 years, that would be crazy. It's been going on since, what, the 70s. So there's that.
So now I get it, because JR argued really hard for judicial pay increases in the Appropriations Committee, and they wouldn't have happened if he hadn't kept pushing it. So anyway, I get it.
Well, and I served on the general government budget last year, and we passed out of committee that we wanted to see an increase in the judicial, and it fell flat. I mean, it's not that there hasn't been some efforts, you know, to get that. And I was hopeful that we were going to be able to do that, but it didn't work out.
And then I made a mistake, and at least one person knew it, because the obvious one is I was looking through the list. There was a decrease from the 14-15 to the 15-16 year of about 50 million overall. So there was a decrease in that year, and I think some of you knew that there was a decrease. I apologize that I didn't keep looking all the way down there, because so there was another guy.
So you're not perfect.
No, well, that part, no.
Thank you. If you support an Article 5 convention, whom do you propose to be our new John Adams and Thomas Jefferson?
So, the Convention of the States, wow, this gets to a lot of stuff. And where do you start on Convention of the States? In general, I do support the Convention of the States. I think it's useful to consider any of the things that we have to move forward. I have heard from a lot of people on it, and a lot of people out of state particularly, who are concerned about the Convention of the States. And I won't pretend to know it well enough to explain it, but at a super high level, there's a mechanism to call a convention of the states to potentially address different things in the federal government. And one of the common ones has been to say that there has to be a balanced budget amendment. So we want an amendment. We're not getting it from the Congress and the Constitution and other routes, so we're going to have a convention of states. We're going to ask for a new amendment or whatever it is, or maybe even a whole new form of government. It's possible to go wild, do something different. There is a ratification process, and I'm trying to remember, I think it's 3/4 of the states to ratify what happens at a constitutional convention. Some folks feel that a convention itself could change the ratification mechanism and make it easier to ratify than that. I think that may be different today than it was initially. Initially, there really wasn't an establishment to start from. I've got somebody from Jerry could probably explain this better than I. But before there was when it was originally established, I don't think there really was that federal government, the association and the communication of the states that worked as well. And I believe there was a change in the ratification in the one constitutional convention that we had that decreased the number of states needed to ratify it. I'm not certain of that, but that I think is the concern if it could go rogue. Otherwise, if you have to have 2/3 or 3/4 of the states ratify something, that's not a bad check. Should we actually be able to come to agreement on that? And as I look at it, it's true in state government, it's true in my business, it's true at the federal government. We do need to be really clear on whatever our mission is that we want to achieve, or we're at risk of failing to achieve anything, right? What is it that we want to make sure that we do, and how do we best do that together? That's the exciting part of working together. As that mission starts to become less clear, okay, how do we fund schools? That should be pretty clear. Not completely, but could it be? And could we move efficiently towards that? I think when the federal government was set up, the mission was fairly clear. Our pledge is liberty and justice for all. Well, maybe it should include health care. Maybe I'm being a little provocative there, not to be difficult, but just to, again, stimulate the thinking of what is it that we want to make sure we accomplish. But as I look at, I think most of us think the federal government has grown bigger than we thought it would. As we built that initial ship and we retrofitted it with different types of power, from wind to industrial to electric or whatever it is, I think it's also been attached by barnacles of good ideas that have made it more and more cumbersome, where we just have to ask the question, what is it that we can best achieve together, and how do we make sure that other great ideas don't distract us from that? To that end, if a discussion in a convention of states could facilitate that type of discussion, I think it could be useful, and I'd be willing to try that. That ratification piece is the one thing that I would want to make sure is rock solid. I haven't been able to figure out how it breaks, but that's where I'd like to ask some government people that know it, just to be able to move forward. I don't know if that was clear or not, but I've spent some time at least thinking about it. Thanks for listening.
We need a bigger table.
But just to handle all that junk. I'm sorry, Dan.
I hope I didn't inflict any damage. While we're ruminating on things, you know, there are unintended consequences with anything we do. And some things may sound like good ideas. And I've heard that, well, some areas that could be addressed with a convention of states kind of concept would be balanced budget, term limits. And I started thinking about term limits. I said, well, yeah, that sounds like a reasonable thing, but there are unintended consequences which come with some of that. Oklahoma, I think, has instituted some term limits. And as a result of their term limits, there is no institutional knowledge in the legislature now. And so people, about the time they're getting to you know, get to where they know something and can get a grasp of the ideas, then they, you know, get term limited out. And so I think that at that point, people that start to run the government in Oklahoma are more of the lobbyists, of the staff. They're the ones with the knowledge. And they're the ones that then become the people that are calling the shots. And I would just soon have the legislators call the shots. You know, I did my own little research, and in the Senate, going back to statehood, there have been 520 senators. And if you divide those 520 by the number of 4-year election cycles, that comes out to 13 years roughly per legislator. And so to me, that sounds like something that would be a natural number to be at anyway. So I'm thinking that, you know, elections seem to work. And at least in the Republican Party, the motto is "we eat our own," and I think that can happen as well. If you want to try to balance the budget, that will be challenging as well. What if the feds come back to us and say, well, we can balance the budget, but you're going to take a 20% cut in Social Security? And I'd go, oh, I don't know if that's such a good idea or not. You know, it always sounds like a good idea until it affects you. And then you start to wonder about it. So, as imperfect as our system is, I think that we need to be careful a little bit about things that we are thinking are good ideas at the time.
I nominate Stephen Jefferson.
Yeah. There's been a lot of speculation about the Convention of the States. At this point, I think we're just starting to get back on our feet again, and every state has different opinions and diversification within their state, and I think at this point in time, I would not support a Convention of the States because I really feel that, as mentioned, you know, we have some experience now as far as being legislators. We get a feel, just like sending out this survey, we get a feel for what our constituents want. And in other states, those constituencies may have a complete different opinion. And if we get ourselves involved in there, then I believe that we lose focus on what we need to do for ourselves in our state here. New York, Florida, California, completely different. More population, more populous, different diversification. We need to concentrate first at home, and when we have our issues taken care of home, then we might want to spread out and get some other ideas. But right now, I kind of like to contain it to where we are, and because we know the folks that live in our communities.
We have a couple of questions that are very similar in nature about the tax windfall. How can you support the windfall tax bill when the state needs all the revenue possible as it digs out of this hole?
But sounds kind of like a tax question. Go right ahead, Bill.
One way to handle it is to vote no. I voted no. But, it's SB 22, and I had several questions about that bill. I hate it when they bundle bills, and this particular bill, the leadership on the Senate side decided, well, they took the bill that I voted against last year, which was Senate Bill, or House Bill 22 something.
Senate Bill 30.
Well, right, and well, it was at the end of the session, and had 4 elements to it, and I did not feel comfortable with that one, and so I voted no. This time, it was the same bill, and the big rush was, well, we need to pass it because it's tax season. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't we just separate out the itemized deductions part of it and vote on that one? Well, I think there was something more political going on with the way that the bill was presented to us. And I really didn't like the way their solution. Their solution was decoupling the state itemized deductions from the federal itemized deductions. And with the potential in 2025, the feds could change their mind again. Then what would we have to do? We did not have a robust discussion about the elements of that tax bill. I was more in favor of, well, the feds raised their standard deduction. Let's just raise our standard deduction to match, to follow suit. When you decouple the two, you raise the price of government. Is all that matters. We're going to have to hire auditors. We're going to have to change our software. And they said, well, we're going to hire 2 more auditors for 110,000 returns. And I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds like an invitation to cheat on your taxes, in my opinion. And so I just did not feel good about the tax bill. And so when I don't feel good about something, I just vote no. And if they want to make it more palatable for me, I'm for. I don't want to keep a dollar more than we need to run our government. We need to pay for our highways, we need to pay for education, we need to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. And I don't think we're there yet, and I don't know what the best way to do that is. And I also want to make sure that we provide incentives for corporations, multinational corporations, to want to come to Kansas, to stay in Kansas. But this particular vehicle did not resonate well with me, and so I wanted something different, and I did not get it. So that's my solution.
There are good reasons to vote for and against virtually every tax bill. So in this question, I think it was, how do you justify returning that windfall essentially when our needs for the money are so great? Did I capture most of it there? And so we can hit each piece of the windfall as well. The thought I would offer for consideration, and again, each of us will still go away with our own opinion on it, is a need for revenue doesn't automatically justify the source. So I want to make sure that I actually intend to take the tax at that point. And I think there are reasons to say, yeah, we'll take it from that point where the windfall was. And there might be some reasons to say not. So that would be the offer that I have in terms of saying, is that it? So in an ideal world, I would like Kansans to be able to itemize on their return. In an ideal world. As Senator Hardy said, it's not free. It also is something we can't audit. And I've had a lot of people joke, I just found $23,999 of deductions, right? Because you can do that as a married person, claim those deductions, and even if we had 2 people, we're not going to have the data to audit it and be able, so we could figure out something looked fishy. Most tax preparers aren't going to work with you on that. Most people use a preparer. However, will people cheat it's likely. What's the degree? Okay, now I have that decision point. While I would like people to be able to itemize, is it worth it to go through that for the state, given that and the need for the revenue? Wow, I think legitimately you can come down a lot of places on that issue. The corporate issue got a lot of talk, and I will tell you, I have a decent understanding of the corporate issue now, and it's still not complete. And the federal government that made the rule admitted that their knowledge was not complete, and they threw up their hands and said, this is what we think is U.S. taxable income. And for that reason, here's how we're going to tax it. Well, then that trickles down to the various states based on how it is. I think we can muddle through a lot of those without changes. I think all of the things that are passed will not have an impact on decisions that companies make. The future things can, and one thing to consider as we go forward is if we tax the global intangible income among the highest half dozen of states, is it possible that some companies would adjust expansion either on paper or for real between other states that affects how much income they pay here? The answer is yes. The degree is we don't know because we don't know how it's going on now. But 2% of our corporations pay 90% of the corporate tax. Even from the multi-state compact who testified for it, they actually stated that corporate tax is a somewhat voluntary tax. That kind of scared me a little. And I can't support that whole notion. But there are a lot of accounting opportunities that are exercised and not fully understood by everybody chasing it all the way through that might be employed through that. And their caution was, again, where are all states? I don't know that we know where all states are going to head over time. Over time, will more states start taxing it? Just because most don't now, which is the case, might they start including that? We have typically included foreign dividends. How do we then tax this? My simple suggestion would be let's tax it as a foreign dividend, which is lower than what is proposed with no change anyway. It is difficult to get all the way to the bottom of that. I think we will want to look at that global intangible issue to make sure that we're reasonably in line with other states. But there are a variety of outcomes that we can argue to that, and we just want to make sure that as we need more revenue for a variety of things, is this where we intend to take it? Because had we by accident taken it from another area, I'd have an outcry from a different group if that change had affected a different segment of the population, and rightfully so. So we want to consider that as fairly as we can, which is a tough word to use on tax policy for whomever the taxpayer is.
Not much to add to that, but one of the elements the real estate community was very adamant about was the mortgage interest deduction. We fought hard the last couple of years to maintain that so that you can deduct that. This bill is not the last train out of the station. First of all, it was sent to the governor, could very well be vetoed and come back to us. There are elements that can be in conference committee. So it's not law yet. So, and that was the only reason why I voted yes, because I knew it was going to pass anyway. But I wanted that mortgage interest deduction in there, that element. And then we're going to be looking at some diversification of this tax bill. So just, as they say, hang on to the wire. We're not done yet. I think it was more of a safe vote to keep it to where we can make some changes, because obviously they weren't going to make any changes on the House floor. So just kind of hang tight. We're looking out for you, and we're hoping that there are going to be some good things come about when it comes back to us.
Collecting a tax that's not previously collected is a tax increase, and I wasn't about to vote for that. So I think also, as Diana said, telling people that they can't take the mortgage interest deduction was just kind of a non-starter. I mean, there are people out there who bought their homes based on that, and I think that there are a number of other deductions too that people can no longer take that they would like to take. The bill also included a reduction in food sales tax. I think that's important to a lot of Republicans, reducing the food sales tax. We are one of the highest in the nation, and it was important to get that down. It also includes a provision for taxing some of the internet sales that aren't currently taxed. Since the Wayfair decision, we've been debating whether we were going to do that or not, and it levels the playing field for Main Street. So there were a lot of reasons to vote in favor of it, primarily the reason being that there are things that are taxed now that weren't taxed before by virtue of the $24,000 deduction at the federal level. So absolutely support it, and I think we should override the governor's veto if she should choose to veto it.
Okay, this question is for any of you. What is your plan to keep business in Kansas and bring new business to our state?
Do you want to start?
That's your question, Jan.
Oh, man. How much time do I have?
Apparently a lot.
So, Stephen Jefferson. Wow. So I think there are a lot of things that we should do. We as a state have we have a lot of opportunities in front of us, and we have a lot of strengths, and we need to build on those strengths. We have some challenges in front of us too, and I think primarily in Salina we just have to decide what we are. I think we're a great community for the arts. It's something that draws people here. We're doing some great things with our downtown. Just driving by, you can see all the construction and concrete getting poured here. It's fantastic. I think we're really using a lot of things too that weren't previously used in Salina and Saline County. Star bonds, using some of those tools, those economic development tools that are now frankly under attack, primarily in the Senate. Those tools were difficult to use when they were first created. So you saw them used by large municipalities that have the resources to hire gobs of attorneys to figure that stuff out. So Wyandotte County, they were able to build a racetrack. It wasn't until you saw law firms specialize in things like star bonds that it became accessible to communities like ours, and that's when they want to kill it. So typically what happens in the lifespan of a economic development tool in Kansas is we create it, Wichita and Johnson County use it, and then they want it dead before we get a chance. And that's what's happening here. The same thing could be said for other programs. We have programs that just absolutely don't work, that we should be investing in others. Performance-based budgeting would probably help with that, some other things. But really, if you want to talk about a plan to grow jobs would say, let's look at premium wage jobs, let's look at the strengths that we have as a community. We do have one of the top flight schools in the nation sitting over here. We have a huge resource in a former air base. We have facilities. We have all sorts of great things. What should we be doing to maximize that and take advantage of that opportunity and turn it into jobs? I can tell you what we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be capping the classes that we have out there at K-State Polytechnic and telling students, well, you can't start flying now, but we'd love for you to enroll and we'll have you start flying in the spring. Even if we went to maximum capacity at every flight school in the nation, we would only meet 25% of the demand for pilots. Tremendous opportunity sitting in front of us, and we have to go out and grab it. But telling students that they can't be a part of those classes immediately, that should not even be on the table. So when we go into appropriations and I say things like, I'm not going to vote for another increase in higher ed spending until this is dealt with, I mean it. $19 million gets funneled into, an additional $19 million gets funneled into higher education, and the K-State Poly campus might see $80,000. That's not going to move the needle. That's spreading everything an inch deep and a mile wide, and we're not going to see a real change from that. So, yeah, plans, I think we already have great plans here in Saline County. I think K-State has a great plan with the Global Aeronautics Initiative. I think we all need to coalesce around those things and start putting our foot on the gas, because waiting isn't going to work. These kinds of opportunities will pass us by. Other states are already gearing up. It's why things like an Aerospace Commission matter. It's why things like HB 2118, the aerospace education tax credit matter, those kinds of things have to pass so that we can start moving that needle, start moving the ball down the field. We lose jobs just like everybody else in aerospace. That 18% hits Salina too. We lost aerospace jobs. We need to go out there and fight to get them back. That's all I got.
And JR has worked on more things than that as you look at how you focus on those strengths that he mentioned. But with the unmanned aerial vehicles, with the airspace that we have to figure out how might you use those more in transportation, potentially in law enforcement, which I wouldn't mind seeing, although there are some concerns with privacy and others to get in the way there. How do we use them more in agriculture, as we have, and we've done that. And he's had other ideas of having an incubator and programs that bring in private partnerships so that if there is somebody with a great idea, there's a way for them to start developing that idea and start that business right here and keep them here rather than looking for resources elsewhere to be able to go from that nascent idea to that new opportunity that fits so well with the resources and the needs that we have here. So I think those are great opportunities to pursue. And the other thing, I think, is continuing to build the partnerships that our education groups across the board have started to really focus on. How do I help each of the children that grows up here find what they want to do and recognize all the needs that are here and all of the skills that are very much needed and in value where that fit can be. And as we get from great value-added jobs there to the skills that I can't fix very much, but I really need people who can. Whatever it is, from mechanical to welding to plumbing, etc. Those are great jobs that we need, and how do we help people really get straight to that, where that is the right fit. And those jobs are right here and they're every day, and they're maybe not as exciting as some of the others that we can, but I think, and each of you have made calls to someone that it seems to take a long time to get on the list to be able to get it addressed. How do we continue to embrace all of those things?
I'd like to insert there that I would like to see that we keep our population here and not have them leave and go to other places for jobs. 1961, I married this young man that's holding the wall up over there. And it's amazing. I was driving down Santa Fe the other day, and I said, this doesn't even look like the same Santa Fe that it was 1961. That as a community, we have great universities here, we have great schools here, and we need to encourage our young people to get into these incubator, which is a fabulous idea. Get those started. It doesn't need to be great big huge manufacturing plants. Yes, we would love to have that, but we have to have something that's more than minimum wage. So if we could have those types of things, there is my son works for a company down by Hutchison that makes tacos, the little taco shells that you buy here in our stores. And they're expanding. I mean, this is a little tiny company. And he says you would not imagine the amount of soft tacos that go out of that facility. So if you increase the aeronautical end of it, but also these smaller companies can employ people who live here and they stay here. So that's what we need to look at. And I think our Chamber of Commerce is doing a fantastic job in trying to promote that and look out there and keep their eye out on these smaller companies and invite them to come here. We have adequate space, lots of land surrounding Salina, except part of the floodplain naturally. We can overcome that. But I think we're on the right track. It's just baby steps, but I think we're on the right track, and the renovation that we have done will more than enhance people to come and say, wow, this is a fabulous thing. So I'm proud of Salina, and I think what we've done so far has been just wonderful. And the excitement that I feel that we're going to do that, and it will happen. Baby steps, but it will happen.
I'll throw out one thing too. At one point, we had a program that went by the wayside when funding evaporated, but it was a resource for small businesses in Salina and other cities in the state that had the potential for growth, but they did not have the knowledge of how to get from 4 to 6 employees to 15 and 20 employees. And but they were good ideas, and so this resource was, well, we'll provide you with an advisor for a month, and they'll work with you, develop a business plan, a strategic plan to help you get from where you are to where you would like to be. And there are a lot of companies that have done that in Salina, and in my case over in Dickinson County as well, that are started out small and now they're big, but they went a different route. But I think that if we provided that kind of resource again, that would give businesses in Salina and the surrounding counties the ability to grow. Where right now all they're trying to do is just make payroll for the next week, and they don't have enough time and energy to look, from above down and see how where the opportunities are for them to grow and to become, a bigger force in Salina. So I think that might be helpful. The other thing is, businesses will not move to Kansas if they don't see that there's a workforce. We need to have a workforce that's educated, that's skilled, and that's plentiful. If a business looks at Saline County and says, well, they're at full employment, where are we going to get our workers? And it makes it a difficult decision for a business from out of state to say, Salina is the place we want to be, but there aren't any people for us to hire once we get there. So that's another challenge that we have.
This is also a part of that question that was just asked. Is the real reason for pilot training not flying right away at K-State not enough planes?
No, it is not. It's not enough. It's not enough certified flight instructors. I do want to peel off on what Senator Hardy said, because I think it's important to expand on that workforce development thing. It is true. I mean, why move your business somewhere where you have no employees, especially none who are skilled in the particular trade that you're interested in? And in talking with some of the aerospace companies that are here in Kansas, they have the same issue. They could have a job fair, and they said, we could have 1,500 people show up, lining up around the block, trying to get into a job fair. But only about 200 of them are going to end up having the skills necessary to come work for us. And that's a problem. But I think HB 2118, that's the Aerospace Education Tax Credit, it solves that problem for those high-skill jobs. It basically says if you go to a Kansas college, K-State Polytechnic for instance, if you go to that college and then you take a job in Kansas at a company that is in that field, aerospace for instance, then we will give a tax credit to the business when they pay off your student loans for you. So essentially, we're paying off the student loans of the student who takes the job and stays in Kansas after they graduate from one of our schools. That type of incentive builds workforce, but that then has the impact of drawing the business here. And I know it works. I know it works because it's another reason we're losing. We see this type of incentive exist out there in the wild in places like Oklahoma, and it's the reason that they got Boeing. They got one of the biggest drone defense contractors on the planet, Kratos, 350 jobs in engineering. And they go there because of that, because that workforce is being built, because they're able to say, hey, graduates over at Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, you come work for us, we're going to be able to pay off your loans. it's a huge incentive to be able to keep someone there, and it's also an incentive for that employer to locate there because they know they can offer that to those potential employees. And those people stay. They build families, they stay, they build communities. It's important that we have things like that as incentives. The price tag's about $5 million of not pulling in revenue that wouldn't have been brought in anyway because our kids leave the state en masse.
This question is for any of you. What is the status of annual position on the bill that would add non-discrimination protections to state law?
So in appropriations, we attempted to do this a couple years, I think last year and the year before, I brought some provisos that would have specific agencies do some of that. And primarily that was because we were seeing in DCF some real issues with bullying amongst employees, and we wanted to see that stop. There was some pretty graphic testimony given related to some issues and incidents of bullying. I'll spare you the details and of course the locations, but it's happening. It does happen. And I thought it was important enough that it rose to the level of dealing with it through proviso, because the state law is a little more difficult to change. You got to pass through an entire process. Sometimes the budget is a way to get something accomplished in an agency when you just want them to put something together and start doing it. Those only have an impact over the course of a year, but if you were to say to DCF in a proviso that you must draft a plan that deals with bullying and discrimination and issues of that nature, then they go do it, the likelihood of them stopping that process in the future is limited. So we asked them to do it through that process. It got stripped out every time, so it really didn't go anywhere, but yeah, that's my 2 cents.
What are your thoughts and plans to fill the 400+ state jobs and to keep them filled? Examples: incentive, pay raise, cost of living.
Just generically openings across the state.
Yes.
I didn't realize it was that low. That seems low. We've actually gone through and we have initiated pay raises for certain areas where we had serious problems retaining and recruiting employees. There was a across the board pay raise, I think 2.5, is that right? I think that's what ended up being put in. We had some serious problems in like corrections. We still have some issues down in El Dorado Correctional, but that's really not necessarily an issue of pay. When you look at the ARC, and I'm just going to use El Dorado as an example because it's probably the most intense one that's out there with the prison. Yeah, El Dorado Correctional. Sorry, the city of El Dorado. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Yeah, El Dorado Correctional Facility. What ended up happening is we put in some pretty significant raises there, but it really didn't bend the arc upward when it came to filling those positions. So it kind of flatlined everything. Instead of dropping like a rock and losing people left and right, we were able to kind of flatline it, but it didn't make things better. And the reason it's not making things better is because there are certain situations where you just simply can't pay somebody enough money to do something. And working 18-hour shifts or having your backup having just worked an 18-hour shift when you're unarmed and around prisoners is pretty rough. But the other piece of that is that, and I received monthly by virtue of my chairmanship on the committee, every month they will give us a status report of the capacity of all of our prisons. And the male capacity has been at 101% for quite some time, which meant we were sending people into county jails or elsewhere, some out of state. When we took Lansing offline, that put a lot of pressure on the system because it essentially said, we're going to take a system at 100% capacity, take about 2,000 inmates and spread them across that system while we close a prison. Albeit temporarily, that has caused, I think, primarily the issues that you're seeing across the system today. But once Lansing's done, we'll go back to 100% capacity because it doesn't add any beds. We will fill that back up. And then I think the working conditions will improve dramatically at El Dorado, Hutchinson, Norton, places like that, where many of those inmates were what they call double bunked. And I think that's a real misnomer, because what ended up happening is they paint this picture that you have a cell and there's one bunk in it and you're just adding another guy to that. You know, just pop a little bunk up there and, you know, no big deal, we'll all be friends. But really what was happening is you had dormitories with 4 bunks and they added 2. So you have 6 people in a tiny little dormitory. And that's what caused the explosive reactions from inmates that tended to bubble over and continue to at El Dorado primarily. And that causes for a poor work environment. So work environment can be a huge part of what needs to happen across the state. But as I mentioned earlier, judicial, non-judicial pay increases, things like that, to address real serious issues across the system. I think the tendency is to say we have this much money for pay raises, spread it across the entirety of all of our state employees. And what that doesn't do is solve the very immediate and pressing problems that sit in front of us. And it also says to everyone that there's been no change in the marketplace over a period of time. There's no change in the demand for your style of position and your set of skills. But that's not true. When someone is in a particular position, there may be an increasing pressure on in competition. We saw that with our highway patrol. We were watching it. I mean, the classes over here got canceled. There were no applicants. We had a class that had 6 in it. But when we came up with our Kansas Highway Patrol recruitment and retention plan, we now set records every year with 40 plus candidates going through the training academy here in Salina. Those kinds of things can move the needle. But if we were just to say 2.5%, you would see the same problem there. It doesn't address the problem. Same thing with El Dorado. If we would have just said 2.5%, it wouldn't have addressed the problem. Not to say that it was the entirety of it, but increasing the pay there by over 20% did stop the hemorrhaging, and I think had a real impact on it. But the question overall is just filling those positions. I think you have to look at both the pay for those positions, and then you also have to look at the work environment. I think it's extremely important. A lot of people have some opinions about the docking building. I don't know if all of you have been to Topeka, but the docking building is an 11-story building that's currently mothballed. The only agency that exists in there is about 6,200 feet of the first floor is the Capitol Police. They occupy that space, and that's primarily because of the proximity to the Capitol complex, where they have surveillance. So they have all the big screens and they're watching all the cameras over there, and they needed space for that. They couldn't do that inside the Capitol. It's kind of constrained as far as the space that's available inside that Capitol. So we're looking at right now, what do we do with this obsolete structure, where if we were to rehab it, it would cost $120 million, and we'd have 7-foot 11-inch ceilings for our employees. That sounds awful. Nobody wants that. So we're looking at what it takes to take that down. I guess this is the complicated factor. The entire energy center for the entire Capitol complex, which includes the Curtis office building, the Landon office building, the Eisenhower, the Capitol itself, and the docking building, resides in a sub-basement underneath that. So there are all the electrical and the steam for the heat and the HVAC, the chillers, all of that sits underneath the docking building. So it really complicates that. But next week, we're going to come with a solution to that problem. And I think one of the things that we'll talk about at length is the work environment for state employees as being part of the reason that someone might want to work there and work for whatever agencies go into a new structure. I think that the agencies that will go into that structure based upon the Capitol Police needing to be there will be the Kansas Highway Patrol, because their leases do come up in 2022 and they're currently spread into multiple office buildings. But I won't get into the weeds with that. I probably over-answered, and I'll let others speak.
Yeah. I'm thinking about this 2.5% figure that's been talked about. The reason why it may not move the needle is That was the only pay increase for a good number of the employees that work for the state for 8 years. They were receiving nothing. That's why we don't have adequate employees. So you can't say, oh, every 8 years, well, here's 2.5% and expect people to hang around. The agencies were gutted from the time the Great Recession hit and then through, well, gosh, 17, really. And when that 2.5% finally kicked in, we can't expect people to hang around. There are people that do hang around, and I respect them tremendously because they're there because they love their job. They love what they do. They see that they're making a change in people's lives. And in the case of our 28th District Court here in Salina, they're working, 30% of them are working a second job just to make ends meet. And that is not a reasonable expectation either. And so that it's something that can be addressed, but the holes are so deep, you can't fill them back in a couple of years' time. It's going to take 10 years. And so in that period of time, we're going to have 100% turnover in some agencies. And it's hard to run a business when you have 100% turnover. But there's, and you'd think, well, if you have 100% turnover, why don't you it's expensive to hire people and train people. So why don't you just pay a fewer number of people more, and at least you would hang on to those folks? Well, I don't know if that's going to catch on with anyone or not. But I would like to think that we could at least take a more strategic approach to our hiring and training so that we don't continue we're just not a revolving door in our agencies. We have valuable employees, but in KDOT, we're just training engineers, and then the next month they go working for an engineering firm that pays 30-40% more. And that's the kind of thing that we're faced with, that we just have to, I guess, deal with for a while until we can backfill those holes and start paying the people what they're worth in their jobs.
What have you learned about the pros and cons of Medicaid expansion in your hall meeting?
Well, I'll jump in. I have supported Medicaid expansion, and in the budget discussion, I saw that the total all funds was $509 million. That's a lot of money. 509. I was operating on a number of 14 million. What's the SGF cost? 14 million. And I thought, well, if that doubles, I'm all right. At 509, I know 10% of that is 50, not just the 14. And the thought that I had, and I shared it with the folks who are working on it, say, okay, let's continue to work, and I know they have, to boil down what is that variance of what could happen on that cost, right? So what is the degree of variance that we could experience? And there's been discussion of that. Now there's some offsetting things. There's tax revenue that comes in from that money coming in that's an offset. We're already writing off part of the care. That may actually show that under the current system, we could figure out a way that is completely revenue neutral. That makes it pretty livable. One of the things that has been talked about is, this is the doomsday scenario, what if the federal money is gone? What if the federal money is gone? I don't have a mechanism to continue without the federal money. How do I appropriately continue what essentially I not only have to have a way to, I get no wind down. I might have to stop. How does that back end really look? And again, I don't know that happens, but I can't plan on a 500 million hit to the state budget. I can't plan on 6 months of that for a wind down period. So how do, I think I can see how I get started. I can almost see my way through to all of these other things in paying for it in the current environment, and I'm almost comfortable that the degree of variance is satisfactory, if that makes sense. I need a little more to be certain of that. But a number of us have always said, okay, we'd like some form of maybe a copay if it's not too unwieldy. How do we just make sure that everybody, however small, has some of the skin in the game? How do we make sure that there is that way to unravel it? And I did get a little frightened when I thought about how hard it would be on people if I had to unravel it, because currently I'd have to unravel it pretty suddenly. And so I just need to think a little more through that end of it. What does that look like? How does that work to continue to have the confidence that I had on Medicaid expansion? And that was a useful question. Another one that's useful, I don't think it's a deal breaker. At each level, we create incentives and disincentives to work. So we have them now that I want to stay on the Medicaid that I have. How do I make sure that I make that as least impactful as possible at each level that creates disincentives? I started gesturing, so it means I need to quit talking.
That's okay. I'm getting quicker.
Representative Johnson has some good points, and the only reason for, or the biggest reason that legislators have to support Medicaid expansion is built into that bill is the ability to back out of it if the feds would drop below their 90% participation. But that it's easy to see on paper, but it's more difficult to implement. But on the other side of the equation, I have Abilene Memorial Hospital that last year wrote off $700,000 in unpaid claims, and some of those claims would have been reimbursed by Medicaid expansion. And and I just heard about another hospital closing this last week, and there are approximately 30 additional community hospitals that are in danger of closing if they don't receive additional funding. And Medicaid expansion would provide that additional funding, and I don't know how much of that would keep those hospitals afloat, but it's something that I think that we need to address in some form or fashion, whether it's Medicaid expansion or whether it's something else. Our healthcare system is not working right now, and I do know that the Senate passed Senate Bill 32, which provided Farm Bureau with the ability to sell a health plan to their members, and provided some relief from excessive premiums and deductibles. And the plan didn't, I don't think it's gone anywhere in the House yet, or maybe it did, I don't know. But, I felt like, well, at least that's something that can help address this horrible health insurance situation we have right now with unaffordable premiums and deductibles. So I don't know what the ultimate answer will be, but I think we have to look for ways to keep our hospitals viable, but to make sure that people have access to health care as well.
I think it's vitally important that we make sure that those who fall below the poverty line have Medicare and be able to have some health care. It's not just the hospitals, it's the communities. You have a hospital close in a community, then you have a school close in a community, pretty soon you don't have a community. And a lot of times in the rural areas is where you're going to find most of the poverty levels because of lack of industry and jobs. But you have to look, everybody, I keep hearing this, well, it's all about the money, and it is. Everything that we do today, you get in your car, it takes money to put gas in it. Everything is about the money. But you have to look at those who perhaps are not as affluent as some other individuals. They have, the federal government has increased the requirements for Medicaid, and there are a lot of those that fall below that or above it. and are unable to get Medicaid help. And I think it's our responsibility as a community, as a state, and as a nation to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. And it all starts at the very beginning. The life support that we have is education. If we can get these kids through school and adequately fund our schools, then they're going to be able to go on perhaps to a higher level of school, college education, or even just trade school, where they have jobs, where they're able to maybe make more money than what they're making now, until they discover when they're 60 and 70 years old, man, I'm just not making it. I can't make it on Social Security. I need to have this health care. So every element that we do in government, from the funding of our schools, making sure that we have, like the aerospace program. My dad was involved in aerospace. I was raised up in aerospace. I know how important that is. And that's something that's not going to go away. It will start to expand. Those jobs will start to expand. But we have to make sure that our students and our individuals and our populace are trained in the skills to be able to take those jobs. So it's all encompassing. But Medicaid right now is what we need for those who were not able to have that opportunity when they were rising up from kids to elementary school, to high school, to colleges. A lot of them stayed home and took care of families. Now they're faced with lack of funds. So it is our responsibility to make sure that we take care of those who cannot take care of themselves or need our help. So that's why I feel that Medicaid expansion is very important. And we talk about all the money going to other places. I think we need to take care of those that need to be taken care of.
I learned that there's a big difference between $14 million and $47 million, and that it's important that we're honest with ourselves when it comes to costs and programs. The line item in the budget was misleading at best. And even if you are going to offset something with revenue, it doesn't change the expenditure line. And I think that the explainers coming out on that were pretty weak. When you spend money, it gets a line item in a budget, regardless of whether it's paid for by a tax revenue, tax withdrawal, whatever you call it. So I would just note that during that time, during that discussion, that the amount that it costs almost quadrupled. And that's over about an hour and a half.
Yeah, and I think that the 14 million, my understanding, was for 6 months period of time instead of a full year. Triple funding, so I know you can triple. That's the way you explain the numbers there, but I agree. I'd always thought it was $47 million. That's the only number that I would believe.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. More questions than time today. We need to be sensitive to the legislators' time and viewers as well. So we're going to allow for them to have their closing remarks. So whichever one of you would like to go first.
I'll go first. Thank you once again to the Salina Chamber and AT&T for sponsoring the forum. I really enjoy the opportunity to meet with citizens in the district to learn what your thoughts and questions and comments are. And my only other comment is I have a sign-up sheet for my weekly newsletter during the session. If you are not receiving it, I try to be as transparent as I can with what's going on in Topeka. I want to let you know, and every vote that happens on the Senate side is included in my newsletter. Pictures of all the people that come to visit me are there as well. So sign up for it, and you'll be part of the process. Thank you.
So thank you for coming today. Thanks to the Chamber for having it. Thanks for your questions, and thanks for listening. I got too windy a few times, and I said that listening was important, so I do hope that I will hear from you. If you don't have my email, I'll give you a card. I trust that I'll hear from Jerry. I hope that I'll hear from Ann. I usually catch you, sometimes sister, so please continue those. I don't get all of my emails responded to, but I look forward to when I see yellow highlighting and red type that comes in an email. I do read those, and I need to hear, and I kind of pushed on some issues a little more than I did, only to say, not to say that I'm right, but here's a perspective that I maybe didn't hear in the question. So the rest of the perspective is necessary, and I hope we get to continue that discussion. So thanks for being here today and listening.
Yeah, thank you as well. Thank you to the chamber and anyone, all the others who are responsible for putting this on. I think it's vitally important that we have this opportunity to answer your questions. We may not know all the answers. Trust me, there are a lot of questions floating around there at the State House that we're desperately trying to find answers for. But thank you so much for coming. You really feel that you are the heart of the community, and then you go out and visit with some of your friends and say, oh, well, I just heard that this last Saturday. I did remind you that there is a survey on the back table, and if you do not have my email address, because I do also put out a newsletter, please let me know so that you're able to receive that. And if you ever have any questions at all, please feel free to give us a call. I answer all the requests, and I usually have a stack of notes on my desk when I get there in the morning, and I try to get to as many as I can. Thank you once again for being here.
Thanks again to the Chamber for putting these on, and of course AT&T for sponsoring. Really appreciate that. We have our next one on April 20th. That's kind of during the break between the regular session and I'd call it a budget session at this point, but the veto session. Maybe we'll get to veto now that the parties in power are separated. But look forward to seeing you at that one on April 20th to maybe talk about some things as the budget gets assembled. Those are some pretty critical times to get things done for our community. I did want to just really quickly touch on the issue with K-State Polytechnic. It was asked twice, so probably warrants some more discussion. Currently, there's a law, and it's been a law since back when K-State merged K-State Poly, and it requires for K-State Poly to have its own line item and to present on its budget annually. That would be the time when the folks over there would come to Topeka and say, these are our needs, and fight for those things that are important to them. That isn't how it happens. That statute is disregarded. The budget simply has K-State as a Manhattan entity. The people here are not allowed to come up and speak on their budget priorities. They have to run everything through K-State in Manhattan. So when things like this happen, where we have issues with not having the staffing that we need here, we don't have a recourse for that through the legislative process except to get real obstinate in the Appropriations Committee and simply say, we found these things out, because we have to go find them out on our own. They don't get to come up there and do that. So I did just want to make it clear that it isn't an aircraft issue. Aircraft can fly all times of the day. It really is an issue of just certified flight instructors and being able to have the faculty available to teach the number of students who want to go there. And it's really difficult for me sitting in an appropriations committee when people complain, well, the enrollment's so low. Well, why do you think that is? The enrollment's low because you won't let all the students go there that want to go there. You won't teach them all in the time frame they need to be taught. And frankly, you won't respond to industry when industry says, we need pilots so fast that you should be doing an academy and doing this in 2 years. So when people come to me and say, oh, we're very responsive to industry, no, you're not. You're not with a 4-year degree that keeps our pilots stuck there for 4 years doing this stuff when they could be doing it online. I mean, everybody knows that you can do a master's degree online. Surely you can do the remaining credits that you need in the flight school online. So anyway, just wanted to point that out, that that's a really difficult part of the process and that it's a constant fight and a constant battle to get wedged away, at least during the budget process, from the K-State Manhattan campus so that our priorities, our needs, that they matter. Because frankly, just over the course of the time that I've been there, it just doesn't seem like it matters. And you can see something slowly wither and die like that. And when it's such a huge asset to our community and really defines a good chunk of the folks who are here, it's difficult to watch that happen.
As Representative Clays mentioned, our next time together will be April the 20th. That will be our last legislative issues meeting for this. So,
Same time and place?
Same time and same place, yes, sir. So hope you all can make it out. Appreciate seeing you today. Thank all four of you for attending. We really appreciate your valuable time.